Hi, I'm Caroline Levitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that was begun just when the pandemic stepped in. It's meant to help independent bookstores, which we all love, love, love. Please shop there. And authors who had their tours canceled or authors who didn't have their tours canceled. And also all of you out there who are readers, and we hope that all of you are. Today I'm really excited. We're going to have a lot of fun today because look at this book, Fly Girl by the most remarkable Anne Hood. It's a really, really happy book. It's about her stint when she did it, she was a stewardess. Now we would call her a flight attendant. And Anne wrote her first novel, actually, somewhere off the coast of Maine on international flights. And I also have to say that when that book came out, it was a vintage contemporary. Is that right, Anne? Vintage contemporary paperback. And I picked it up and I read it in one day and I felt like, oh my God, she wrote this book. Now I have to write a book. I mean, it made me want to write. It was so, so great. So anyway, the book was published in 1987. Since then, she's published in the New York Times, the Paris Review, Oh, Bon Appetit, Tin House, the Atlantic Monthly, and many other wonderful places. She's won 2 Pushcart Prizes, 2 Best American Food Writing Awards, Best American Spiritual Writing and Travel Writing Awards, and a Boston Public Library Literary Light Award. She's the author of The Red Thread, The Knitting Circle, The Obituary Writer, The Book That Matters Most, Morning Star, about Marjorie Morningstar, my favorite book. Comfort, it is. I love that book. Comfort, An Italian Wife, An Ornithologist's Guide to Life. And she started the company Gracie Bell Books, named after her 5-year-old daughter, Gracie, who died of strep in 2022. So I am just completely thrilled to have Anne Hood here. Anne, welcome. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, my friend.
It's
Even
so
if it
good.
is virtual.
Well, that's okay. I'm just glad to have seen you. So I have a million questions. I want to say everybody out there first, buy your books in these bookstores. Bookshop.org is the place that Mighty Blaze loves. Or you can walk down to your favorite indie bookstore. If you have any questions, don't be shy. You don't even have to give your name. Just pop it in the chat. All right, so let's talk about this wonderful book that I love, Fly Girl by Anne Hood. So when you were in 7th grade, you read a book about how to become an airline stewardess. So first I want to know, do you still have that book? And
do.
what was it? Oh my God. And what was it about that book that made you think, that's for me? That's what I want.
So, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a writer since I was like 7 or 8. I read Little Women and I was like, I want to live in a story. Like I want to live in a novel. And that's what we do, right? When we become writers,
That's what we
live in our
do.
stories. Yeah. But I didn't really know how to do that. And what I believed was that you had to have adventures in order to be a writer. And I lived in this small town in the smallest state. I went to the state college. I thought, how does a girl get out of here? And how does she get it? And the answer seemed obvious after I read the book, How to Become an Airline Stewardess. Lunch in Manhattan, dinner in Barcelona, shopping in Paris, that could all be yours. And I was like, this is the job I need, always with the intent of it feeding my imagination and my experience and giving me something to write about, The book's first line is something like, would you like a boyfriend in every city in the world? And I was like, yes. I live in this scrubby little town, yes, I would like that. I actually read the book from the library because I was a library kid. There wasn't a bookstore for miles around my town. But I tracked it down long ago. I found it in a used bookstore. So I have an old copy that I refer to a lot, writing Fly Girl, because I wanted to get all those wonderful.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's like, there was a lot of books like Coffee, Tea, or Me, with a little stewardess like this, which perpetuate that whole thing that stewardesses were glamorous, sophisticated, and totally sexy. And yet when you write about it, I don't know whether it's because I know you or it's the way you write, but it seemed to me an absolutely empowering job for a young woman back then. Absolutely empowering.
100%. Somebody turned to me the other day with great shock on her face and said, now that I've spoken to you and I've read Fly Girl, I just realized that 22-year-old young women are responsible for 400 lives on an airplane if something goes wrong. And
That's
you have
right.
to be empowered to be able to do that, right?
That's right.
It taught me poise and confidence and maybe most of all, independence. You know, at the
Yeah.
age, fresh out of college, I'm on layovers alone in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and then just a couple years later, Lisbon and London. And it taught me to be able to walk into any room, any city, anywhere, and feel at home and make others feel at home. I mean, it's really a gift.
It's
And
a gift.
that is an empowerment for women. You know, nobody puts baby in the corner. I was taught that, and I also, it gave me the confidence to be able to solve problems in a minute, like on the spot.
Hmm.
And to deal with emergencies, because emergencies happened all the time of all different sorts. So what could be
You
more empowering than all of that, right?
Yeah, it read like that. It read like that. You already have a question from Adelina. Oh, I love your name. And how were you able to maintain your hiring weight when you traveled to all foreign countries and tasted their fabulous cuisine? I bet that's because you were 22.
Oh,
22, you just burn it up.
oh, I maintained it, but I don't anymore. Actually, this leads to an interesting point. So when you applied, every airline sent you their own weight chart. So you'd look up your height, and it would have the maximum weight in order to even get an interview. Not forget. So I'm 5'8", so that was 140 pounds. Okay, I weighed 125. Just because, I mean, I was a normal person. I ate my Hostess cupcake,
Right.
and drank my Dr. Pepper, but I was 125 pounds. But like almost everybody I met in that job, when they wanted to get hired, they thought they needed to be thinner still. So I lost 5 more pounds. I was hired at 120, at least at TWA.
God.
I couldn't gain weight and equal 140. I had to stay at my hiring weight, 120.
Oh my God.
The chart lost meaning once you were hired. And my wonderful roommate, 5'9", who could have been hired at 145 pounds, was hired at 135 and was fired for weighing 140.
Were there eating disorders then? Did you have people who
Somebody else asked me that, and not that I was aware of, though we did really dramatic, stupid things to keep at our hiring weight.
like drinking nothing but water?
Yeah, taking diuretics,
Right.
sweating it out, going to saunas. Because when we got off planes, this was during the first 6 months when we were still on probation. This would happen, a crooked finger, and they would take you to the secret scale and record your weight, called a weigh-in. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I had 6 roommates. Well, I was one of 6. And someone always came home saying, I'm on weight check, which meant the next time you had to have lost that pound or 2.
Oh my God. Can you tell us about the hilarious Breach Training Academy where you were
Oh,
trained? I want to go there. I absolutely want to go there because you made it sound like just
oh,
so wild.
I have to say that I asked, I was on a book tour and I was in Kansas City, and I asked this driver to take me to Breach Training Academy. He looked at me like I was like, what's wrong with you? Because it's now just office buildings, but I really wanted to know if it still had the mod furnishings and decorations. So it's this big campus. I mean, it's many, many acres, but everything, it was built like in the 60s. So it's mod. That's the only word. TWA red. That's a certain color red. If you go to Terminal 5, where there's now the TWA hotel, that carpeting is classic TWA red. The cover of Fly Girl has it. It's a deep, true, like crimson. And everything was modular. So there was a sunken living room.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. It was like the Jetsons had built it. And we were there 6 weeks, and there was all throughout the campus, there were mock-ups of airplanes. So not full 747s or 727s, but partial ones, where we would spend half a day or whatever practicing evacuating them, practicing service on them, learning where all the emergency
Right.
having tests. And we were tested 2 or 3 times a day on all sorts of stuff that doesn't really go together, because that's the job. You have to cover so many different things.
So tell us about how you began writing this book, and I wrote down the title and I can't find it. It was like a long title, like the something of Samuel something, and then you then you gave it up to write Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine. But how did you manage to write while you were on the plane? Is there a lot of Did you
Well,
just grab downtown? How did you get in that zone to do it?
somebody asked me last night at a reading, and I thought it was so sweet because they said, like, when did you do it? Like between the liquor service and the meal service? I'm like, no, no, no. I did it on long flights. The short flights,
Right.
you don't have time to breathe.
Yeah.
And I did plenty of those. I have to say, um, it was called the Ohio Valley route, and no one wanted them because you just went like 3 or 4 or 5 places a day for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And it was, I love all these cities, so it's nothing against them, but it'd be like Pittsburgh, Detroit, Columbus, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and just went back
Right.
and forth and forth. Yeah.
Right. It's not Paris.
No, and nobody says I want to be a flight attendant because I'd love to go to Dayton. That's just not why you do it. You want to go to Paris. Right? And so it was on international flights that I really started writing somewhere off the coast of Maine.
So you basically taught yourself to write, is that correct?
It totally did. I'm an
Unbelievable. How did you do that? Were you studying other books as you were reading? And
Yeah. I mean, I tell my students it was really easy. I read books. If you read enough, you figure out the
figured it
machinations,
out. Right.
like even things like how to punctuate dialogue. When a student does it wrong, it makes me a little like cranky because I'm like, open a book. I mean, this is easy.
Right. It's there.
I would do things like write on the page, like opened with action, the things you're taught if you do manage,
Right.
study creative writing.
So what was that first book about?
Okay, listen, you teach and you have taught, and so there are classic, maybe 10 or 8 or 12 first time novelist mistakes. So check them all up. It was a revenge novel. Someone had made me mad, and I decided to write about her. The character's name rhymed with the real first name of the real person.
Oh.
And then if I read a Raymond Carver story, that chapter was very minimalist and kind of abstract and vague. But then if I reread The Great Gatsby, I had this lush, lyrical, turn of the century language, imitative. But I tried. I just made every mistake. I didn't go back. I didn't even know revision was a thing you had to do. So I just kept plowing forward. And I would be like, oh, I've got to remember that I got rid of those 5 characters. But I didn't go and get rid of them. And so people came and went at random. And Sam Pepper was actually a girl, female.
Oh, Sam. I kept thinking it was this guy. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was so clever to give the main character.
Do you still have it? Do you still have that manuscript?
No, it ended its life. I ended its life in Sullivan Street. I mean, I started rereading this 300 or 400 handwritten pages.
Oh.
I got maybe to page 50. I was like, okay, this is the worst thing I've ever written. Went downstairs, had this teeny studio on Sullivan Street in Greenwich Village. Conveniently, a dumpster was right there, threw it in.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's some story. So did you know when you were writing somewhere off the coast of Maine that it was as good as it is?
Well, I knew it was better than Pepper, that's for sure.
Okay.
It's that what was really interesting is I read these dreadful pages. I threw it away. I turned to go back. It was a very funny apartment building. You walked through like an archway into a courtyard. It had been a convent up these steps. So there was a fountain. It just didn't feel like New York City. The building was pink. So I go back into my pink building and I feel oddly liberated, not at all upset that I've thrown this out. And I go up into the little apartment and my electric, IBM Electrics typewriter is sitting on the little cafe table in there. And I sat down, I put a piece of paper in, and I wrote a page, and that is the first page of Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine.
Wow. That's extraordinary.
Just like something,
So while you were like, there's this weird sort of dual timeline that you're having at the same time where you're loving your job on the planes and you're also loving being a writer. Talk about how you managed both of those.
Well, how many times, I'm sure people listening have done this, that before you're published, you don't really think you're a writer.
Right, which is not true.
It's not true. And I always tell people that. And I luckily had a wonderful boyfriend who was an actor. And he said to me, you write every day. Being published doesn't make you a writer. You make you a writer, And he would say, when someone asks you, if we're together and someone asks you what you do, you can say, I'm a flight attendant and I'm writing a novel. You can say that. I was like, I don't think so. So I lived kind of a double life in a way. Like when my old roommate, when I told her I was getting a book published, she said, what? She had no idea I even wrote. and I had notebooks, and I would go to my room and write. So I really was only a flight attendant / published writer for half a second, for a very brief amount of time.
But it's interesting. There's one story in the book. Let me show I love this cover so much. But there's one story in the book where some guy, I think it was on the plane, goes up to you and says, "What do you do? What else do you do?" And you said, "I'm a writer." And he says, You can't be a writer. You're too dumb to be a writer." And you had just gotten this big book contract.
Yeah.
And he said, "No, you could not. You just look too dumb." And then years later, he came to a reading of yours, right?
Waited in the line yet to be said. He said, "I bet you don't remember me."
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do.
I bet I will never forget you. That was my Schadenfreude moment. I said no more. He was a best-selling writer. And he was on this plane to Tucson, going to the Tucson Literary Festival. I realized years later. And he was acting like someone who had never flown, and he was in first class. And in those days, people who flew first class knew how to fly first class. You didn't have miles to upgrade. You paid for that ticket, or someone paid to put you there. And so I asked him what he did, and he told me he was a writer. And that's what I said. I just sold my first book. And he would have none of it. Really
Unbelievable. Okay, so he had issues. I would also like you to talk about your relationship with the captains. There's one story in the book which you'd actually told me before, I think at Pulpwood Queens, about how the head pilot had asked you to go get him Jack Daniels, and you said, "I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to do that." And he said, and he went and he got it for himself.
Double.
So outside of that incident, which is really alarming, what was the relationship between the captain and the flight attendants?
TWA was sort of famous for not having hired pilots in about 10 or more years when I was hired, because they had scooped up all the Vietnam pilots. And as those Air Force pilot or Navy pilots left Vietnam and went into civilian life, TWA actively sought them out and employed them. So these guys were a lot older than we were, the new flight attendants.
Oh, so they were old school.
Yeah, so they were either like your favorite uncle or your least favorite uncle or something in between. We didn't go out with them. I had imagined that the crews went out in Rome and said, no, it wasn't like that. They were older. Many of them had married flight attendants in the 60s. Many of them were commuting from Arizona or places where people go to retire, West Palm Beach. So they were tired. They were older. They were going to retire in 10 years or something. Many lovely people, but not pals or dates or anything like that.
Oh, we have a great question from Julie. Would you recommend being a flight attendant as a job?
100%. Now, I can't speak to what the job is like during and since the pandemic, where you read about they're getting their teeth knocked out and people are so angry about the mask mandates. Although I understand that now that it's lifted, things are returning to normal again. I can't think of a better thing to do if you like people and if you like to travel. I mean, you have to have those two qualifications. If you're someone who's timid, that's not going to work for you. But if you are your average friendly person who likes people and can think on their feet and really wants to see the world, it's such a great job. You don't work every day of the week. You don't ever have to, you don't get up every morning and put on, some sort of business attire and on a car or train and go to the office. It's so liberating. You don't really work with a boss. You're your own boss. That's part of what's so empowering.
That's the best.
Do
they still have weight and age restrictions now?
Oh, I love that question, because this is part of why I get sort of upset when people think flight attendants are sex kittens or glorified waitresses.
No, I've seen older ones. I have seen gray-haired ladies as flight attendants, and I've loved it.
I love it. And flight attendants have been fighting for decades, since the 50s, for equal rights in work. And that includes ageism. You used to have to retire at the age of 32. As TWA,
32?
TWA famously said, if a man doesn't want her by then, TWA sure doesn't.
Oh my God.
So ageism, restrictions about marriage, restrictions about having children, and the weight restriction, which was lifted, hold on to your seats, everybody, in the 90s.
Oh my God, that's so late.
Yeah, so late.
That's so late.
Me among them, we fought for this, heavily unionized, except for Delta is not. But everyone else heavily unionized, fighting all the time for better work rules, equal pay, all the things that feminists do.
Wow. You have a great story in the book about spaghetti carbonara and how it influenced you into being a chef. So I wanted to know how, and I know you're like a stupendous cook and your husband Michael is a chef.
Yep.
So how does cooking relate to writing? So that's actually kind of a 2-3 part question.
I think I can touch on them all. So the brief story, when you read the book, you'll find out many more details about it.
It's a great story.
I am Italian, but I'm Southern Italian. And I was very naive about many things when I worked as a flight attendant. And so I'm a red sauce Italian kind of person. That's how the South has tomatoes. And that's why much of their food has tomato sauce. So I was in Rome on a layover and I went out alone and it's terrifying. I was like 23 or something, stepped out alone, got in a cab, but had this name from the hotel written on a piece of paper. Sat down and looked at the menu. I did not recognize one thing. I ordered spaghetti carbonara because I knew spaghetti. I didn't know what I was going to get, but I knew I recognized spaghetti. And of course, carbonara, as most of you know, is this wonderful, porky, cheesy, eggy. It's like eggs on spaghetti and cheese. And I fell in love with it. And it was the first time I tried to make something. I failed and failed and failed. There weren't a lot of cookbooks out at that time. So it was trial and error. It is still my signature dish. My daughter could eat it every night. My son asks for it when he's home. It's one of our favorite standards at home. But cooking is like knitting is to me. And I'm a big knitter.
Oh, yeah.
Which is that when I'm chopping and I'm standing there stirring risotto, my mind is free and I always solve problems. I always solve writing problems or come up with writing ideas. Across the board, there's never a time that doesn't happen. So it's odd to think cooking helps your writing, but
I think it does. It's a creative act.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that you do where your brain is both engaged and free at the same time.
Right. One of the things that I loved so much about this book, it actually stopped me and I had to reread it a couple times, is there's such a sense of you as a writer in the endings that you didn't get to see, like the bridal party that didn't make it in time, or that wrenching story of an estranged dad who had to leave the presents for his kids on the plane. It's like, it was so what I got out of that was first that your exquisite eye for detail and for the story, of course, because that's what writers do. But also, did any of those stories find their way into your writing, or did you complete them in your mind?
They did not find my way into, not literally, but I'm sure the emotional piece of it, like an estranged father who messes up yet again. I mean, that is in my mind, that's what happened to that poor guy in his rush to get off a plane that wasn't going anywhere and to get to see these kids he hadn't seen in years. He forgot the beautifully wrapped presents in the overhead bin. So, I mean, that emotion, I'm sure I've captured in a story or in a character in a novel. But I really wonder about the ends of those stories. And every time I'm asked that, and there's people out there, if you were that guy, or you were that bride whose wedding party did not make Oklahoma City, let me know what happened, because I'd like to know. I have so many endings to these stories. I mean, it's not the best story, but the woman who, unbeknownst to her, there was a dirty diaper left under the seat.
Oh God, I forgot that story. You just reminded me.
Purse, which is smeared with it, on her white suit on her way to her dream job interview in San Francisco.
I hope she was. Oh, right, and they were picking her up, so it wasn't like she couldn't quickly. So there were no like extra flight attendant skirts or anything.
I remember. I think it's one of like the most futile, weakest things. Can I get you some club soda? And she looked at me like, club soda is not going to fix this. Because that's what you would take if someone got a little wine on them or something. You'd give them.
Oh,
Yeah, I was like,
oh.
worse than club soda. Yeah.
So, there's sort of like a side question to that, which is you were told to say something meaningful to three
Oh,
people.
oh boy.
And the stories about that were like you would see people all dressed in black and you thought, oh, they're from New York. They must be folkies. And it turned out they were on their way to a funeral.
Their mother's funeral, not any funeral.
Or you saw people wearing ribbons and you thought, oh, that's so cute. And they said, no, we're commemorating murdered children in Atlanta with these ribbons. So I wanted to know, how did you become more intuitive about that? How do you know, just looking at a person, what to say?
Well, I realized, this is part about how the job helped me mature and read rooms and read people. I realized that the edict to have three meaningful conversations didn't mean you needed to know something important about their life, like, are you a folk singing group and where are you going to sing? But really you're on your way from your mother's funeral. But you just look someone in the eye and comment on one thing, and that's meaningful to them because most flight attendants don't bother. So what I realized is, just telling a mom that her baby is adorable and how old is that baby, no one's offended. And
Right. That's
notice
right.
their baby, and every mom loves that. Or just saying to someone as you're picking up their food tray, oh, is Denver home? Or are you on your way somewhere? They're so happy for one simple exchange. So I think I read, having been an English major, months earlier, I think I read too much into the rule of meaningful conversation. You are.
So when you're just meeting people at a party,
Yeah.
how do you pick up on, how do you know what to say to people you don't know? Would you say like, oh, I like your glasses? Or, I mean, do you pick up a physical thing first or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The hardest thing I had to do when I first started flying was when I worked for first class, you had to memorize every passenger's name and use
Oh,
use it on the flight. On the memorizing now, forget it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't memorize 16
I
names.
couldn't do it.
But that part I could handle, but it was the second part, which was, hi, Mr. Jones, I'm Anne. I'll be your flight attendant. I'm Anne. I was like so paralyzed with nervousness and fear. And I would stand in the galley, like looking at that manifest, practicing in my mind, just say it. Your name is Anne. And now when I think about how many times as a writer, doing book events, when that person picks you up to take you to the bookstore, you meet the bookstore, what do you say? Hi, I'm Anne. It's something
That's right.
your whole life. But 21 years old in that beautiful uniform on a 747, I'm Anne, and I will be your flight attendant, was one of the hardest things I had to do. Isn't that funny?
That's hilarious, and actually really good advice too. I wanted to talk about the deregulation
Mm.
of the air industry because it seemed like it changed flying from this luxury dream to what we have now, where you never have any space and the person behind you is kicking you and the food is garbage. And
Or if there is food, right?
yeah, like why did they agree to do that
So
beside the usual money and power? And do you think it'll ever change back?
no, I don't think it'll ever change back. We can thank Ted Kennedy and Supreme Court Justice Breyer. They spearheaded deregulation. And
Oh,
they did it for what seems like a good reason, because before that there was something called the CAB, and they fixed prices.
right, that's right.
New York to LA would be like $1,200 in inflation, adjusted for inflation. So people didn't fly. And the example that Breyer used in an article many years after deregulation was a businessman would get in a coach seat and he'd be the only one in the row. So he could put his briefcase on the seat next to him and his
Right.
on the other seat. And it's like, do you really want, but you were paying for that $1,200 where now you could get a flight for 300 or 400 to the same place. There's like, Breyer believes that people would still opt to not buy a seat for their briefcase. That's his thing.
Okay.
It opened up the market. The CAB used to also, like, you're an airline and you come to the CAB, you say, I'd like to start flying to Oakland. And they'd say, okay, in 11 years or not at all, or no. And so really airlines were sort of unable to grow in certain ways. But then it was like the Wild West.
Sorry, I thought I turned it off.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
sorry.
Love
Do you still get excited when you get on a plane?
it every minute. love being at the gate, love boarding, love being stuck in the jetway. I feel like when you leave that jetway, you step onto the plane, you've just entered this beautiful bubble. And when you step off it again, you're going to be somewhere completely different. It's amazing to me still. Flight is still I am still awestruck by
It
flight.
is amazing. You look in the sky and think, how does it stay up? Somebody once explained it to me with vectors, and I thought that makes it more
I
weird
don't
to
want to
me.
know that. I don't want to know that. I believe in fairy dust.
Yeah, so I have one more question. Oh, wait, we have a question here from Ellen. She wants to know, are you watching The Flight Attendant?
I am not. And Chris Borjalen, who wrote it, is a friend of mine. And he has family ties to aviation. And he gave this book a beautiful blurb. Sweetest man. But when you're
Yeah, he's
writing,
a wonderful guy.
such a great guy. But when you're writing a book about being a flight attendant, you
You
don't want to write
can't. That's
anybody
right.
else's book about being a flight attendant. So I didn't read it, and then it started, and I was still working on mine, so it kind of passed me by.
Can you say anything? Oh, wait, I have another question before that question. A lot of this was such a Valentine to my favorite city in the world, New York City, complete with the grunge of the 80s, the bathtubs in the kitchen, the
Yeah,
slanted floors. And I wanted to know, did you also find that there was a kind of romance to that when
I
you were
loved
young?
it. Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
loved
loved it.
every minute of it,
Yeah,
and I
me too.
felt like I was a pioneer. Like, my
Yes.
friends had these cushy apartments in Boston, everything was so clean. I had a friend who moved to Maine, after college, and she came to New York, and she was just like her eyes were, this wide at, "This is where you live, this is what you do, this is how you get places." She couldn't believe it, and I felt proud of all that.
Yeah, me
You
too.
what a rite of passage, and I don't know, maybe you also do, but I kind of lament that some of that's gone.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I mean, we're in the city all the time, and I go by my old apartment, which had a slanted floor, and people used to come in and say, they'd look at the closet and say, "Is the bedroom in there?" And I'd say, "No, this is it.
This is the
This is
whole
it. A bed, a desk, and it's mine, and this
Yeah,
is it." I do miss it. I liked that edge of danger.
I
I
did
mean,
too. I
I
did
did, and possibility, and seemed to me there were so many interesting writers and artists and crazy people, and I liked it, and I
Yeah, I mean,
still like it.
I don't know where did you live in the East Village?
I lived on 409 West 24th Street. Then I
Okay,
lived on 320 West 22nd.
never
Then
forget
I lived on West 21st. I forget which one it was. And
the
all the stories just made me love the places more. And there were like
Absolutely.
crazy stuff going on. Crazy, crazy, crazy insane.
In fact, I will tell you that taxi drivers would often not take me home. Like, I'd get in the taxi at Kennedy Airport. This is when I lived, are you ready? It was only for about 6 months, but I lived on, 7th Street between C and D in 1980.
Oh my God, you couldn't go there. That was Alphabet City,
So
dangerous drug
So
dealers.
now it's so gentrified, but they would say, "No, we don't drive there, lady," or they would say, "Does your mother know where you live? You get in here." And they would actually walk me into my building.
Oh yeah, I used to have friends. I used to ask couples just walking up 8th Avenue to my apartment was so dangerous. I'd stop a couple and say, "Would you mind just like walking me to 24th Street and just like wait and see if I get in?" And I'd say, "Oh my God, of course we will. Of course we
Yeah,
will."
yeah. That's what it was like. Why did we love it? I don't know. We love danger.
Because it was great, and because we were pioneers. We were doing
Yeah,
something that nobody I knew wanted to do except me.
yeah,
So,
exactly, exactly.
okay, so do we have any more questions, Ollie? Um, okay, well, we're waiting for another question. I have another question, which is, um, are you writing now, or are you taking a break because you're touring and crazy busy? And
Yeah, it's sort of a combination. I have finished a novel that will come out, at some point.
you're amazing. You are amazing. Can you say anything about the novel, or you just
So it's
don't
it's
know?
called The Museum of Tears. And
Oh, right. You told me about this, I believe. Oh my God, I'm so jealous that I didn't think of that idea.
I had started that book and then had the idea for Fly Girl. And my publisher was so excited about Fly Girl. They said, "Take your time writing the novel. We really want to bring this out." And I think because of the pandemic, that was even a better choice because people are hungry for
It's the
right.
perfect book.
Yeah.
It's the absolute perfect book. Ollie, are you there? Oh, yes. Did you ever forget what city you were in, Or did you ever think you were landing in a different city than where you ended up? Good question.
Not really, but I'll tell you, when I did a lot of those trips, I described those ups and downs. I had to keep reminding myself because I wouldn't get off. So we were just going from one city in Ohio or Pennsylvania to another city in Ohio or Pennsylvania. And so I would always have to check which one I was in. But I pretty much knew where I was. So that I do now, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Do we have any last questions, Ollie? Oh, we think we have time for one more. And if not, then I have my famous question for you, which is what's obsessing you now and why?
Okay, I feel like every time you ask me that, I'm so boring because it's always about knitting. But I have to tell you,
No.
I'm knitting something called a temperature blanket.
Oh, what's that?
So every day you record the high temperature of that day wherever you are, and each temperature range of 5 degrees is assigned a color. And so it's kind of a random pattern. Like it was 76
Wow.
today, but like a few days ago, it was like 51. So the colors are
Oh, how
wild.
great.
You cast on 310 stitches,
That's a lot.
and then
And
it's
the needles must be
365 long. Yeah. And you do 2 rows for every day. And it is the most fun knitting project because I look, oh my goodness, today I'm doing this color I haven't done yet because it's getting warmer. And I started it January 1st.
I
And
love
so
it.
if you Google it, you'll see so many
It's I want to write it down. It's the temperature blanket. The
temperature
temperature blanket.
blanket. A woman the other night, I did a reading in a knitting store, and she called it a Fahrenheit blanket. So it's same idea, but they're just gorgeous. And my friend lives in LA, and he said, well, mine wouldn't be that interesting. I said, no, because it changes every 5 degrees. So you might end
Yeah.
up with a blanket that's all blues and purples, but it's not going to be all blue. And it's just great. It's great. So it's my fun
That's
part.
a great idea, especially if you take your time knitting it. Can you imagine? The colors in the winter would be very different swatch than for
Uh-huh.
in hot summer.
It's beautiful.
Well, I want to first let's look at this gorgeous cover once again. Fly Girl by Anne Hood, bookshop.org, wherever books are sold. And I want to thank you, Anne. I absolutely love this book, as I have loved all of your books since Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine. And in fact, I have the original copy of it
Oh,
somewhere up here with the original
I
vintage
love
cover with the three faces. I just love it. And I still remember Sparrow. One of the girls' name was
it.
Sparrow. I
You're
thought,
right.
how cool is that? So thank you so much for being
Thank
here, and
you.
I
Thank you for having me.
can't wait to see your next book. And thank everybody for being here. And again, this interview is going to live on a Mighty Blaze forever on our YouTube station. So go and take a look, and we'll see all you guys later. So
Thank you,
bye.
everyone. Bye.